threatened legally for him to shut up. Again, telling somebody to stop and shut up and stop asking questions over a word that he used to describe that memo. Charlie Kirk had died under a tent at Utah Valley University. Now, that tent had 3 words pretty much written all over it: prove me wrong. That was Charlie's entire brand. That was his mission. That was him showing up to college campuses across America, inviting people to challenge him, question him, debate him, and prove him wrong. If you don't agree with Charlie, get in front of the line. Essentially, that's what he's saying. Those were his words, not mine. His. You don't agree with me? Get in front of the line. So this week, Turning Point USA has issued a cease and desist letter to Zach from Wolves of Finance. He's an independent journalist. He's a working accountant asking questions about the financials of tax-exempt organizations, specifically Turning Point USA and subsidiaries. Now, what would Charlie say about this? Okay, let me tell you what Charlie Kirk stood for, because the organization bearing his name has seemed to have forgotten everything that he stood for. Charlie built his entire career on confrontation, on questioning, on accountability. The Prove Me Wrong tour wasn't just a marketing ploy. It was his philosophy. He would set up that tent on college campuses and literally invite people challenging him. Students who disagreed got priority in line, okay? He wanted that confrontation. He asked for it. He wanted it. He needed it. Turning Point USA posted on Facebook, "Join Charlie Kirk on campus for a lively discussion of freedom and America." Don't agree with Charlie? Great. Get to the front of the line. See you there. Charlie fought universities that actually tried to cancel his events. He positioned himself as a champion of free speech and a champion of open debate, of intellectual diversity, biblical diversity. He was very understanding of multiple cultures. Senator Mike Lee defended Charlie's campus's appearances by saying we should have heightened degrees of attention and focus and a heightened degree of protectiveness around free conversations where different viewpoints are examined. Our students deserve open discussions and vigorous debate. And that's what Charlie stood for. And when you have people criticizing him, when they protested his events, when they tried to shut him up, when they tried to turn him down and shut him away, you know what Charlie said? We're going to have a good chat. He welcomed these questions. He invited the scrutiny. Most importantly. So let me ask you again, what would Charlie say about sending legal threats to a YouTuber who's reading public tax filings and asking questions about a nonprofit organization that's supposed to be representing the conservative party in America? What would he say? And how would he do it? What would Charlie do? WWCD. Maybe I should make some bracelets to remind everybody. This is what Wolves of Finance actually did. I'm going to tell you. He read Form 990s, public documents, tax filings that TPUSA submitted to the IRS under penalty of perjury, mind you. He looked at the Schedule Ls, he looked at Schedule Gs, he looked at interested persons and contract disclosures, and he asked questions. Why did the 990 forms show 80 out of X amount of employees? Why weren't they initially reported? Why is the COO classified as an independent contractor instead of his employee? Why did donations to Turning Point Action increase from 10.7 million to 27 million plus in just one election year? Where did that money go? These aren't accusations. These are questions. The kind of questions that Charlie died asking. Because 8 days before he was assassinated, Charlie Kirk, he wrote that memo, and it's been confirmed through that legal precedent. Charlie Kirk wrote the memo about a DOGE effort within his organization. You know what this was about? It was about accountability. Charlie's memo described that he wanted a DOGE effort, and before TPUSA's lawyer jumps down my throat, I'm being very specific about my language here. The memo used the words DOGE effort, not DOGE audit. And I'm quoting Charlie's words specifically. And you know what? I think a DOGE effort is even more scrutinizing than a DOGE audit, because a DOGE effort is the most molecular and meticulous approach as an effort that you could get to an audit. So the effort is actually not just an audit. The effort is full circle. So I'm actually happy that it's not just a DOGE audit, that it's a DOGE effort, because a DOGE effort to me means that every single thing going on through the finances will have a molecular effort to the audit if they were to have. So let's go ahead and read this internal memo about this DOGE effort that Charlie Kirk wrote 8 days before he died. Charlie Kirk, founder and CEO, to Turning Point USA employees on September 2nd, 2025. Dear Team America, effective immediately, Justin Streiff is taking on a new role elevated with Turning Point USA as the Chief Operating Officer. Since joining TPUSA in 2020, Justin has led Turning Point's fundraising division and in more recent years has been involved in some organizational operations, filling the COO role in many ways, but now officially taking on the title and expanded responsibilities. In the COO role, Justin will directly oversee development, events, finance, TPUSA Faith, media, marketing, productions, asset management, distribution, Turning Point Education, Brexit, HR, and Legal. Justin will also closely coordinate with Andrew Cipher on the National Field Program. In this new role, I have empowered Justin, among other priorities, to engage in an organizational-wide DOGE effort. Justin will be assembling a small team to assist in the effort, which is focused on TPUSA. 1, becoming more efficient. 2, becoming more cost-effective. 3, unifying organizational success around company-wide metrics and goals. And 4, reshaping company culture. I expect many positive changes to come from this forthcoming initiative and Justin's expanded role. Please join me in congratulating Justin on this new role with the organization. As always, thank you for everything each of you do for Turning Point USA. Now, let's get to work and save America. Thank you, Charlie Kirk, founder and CEO. Now, TPUSA's lawyers are saying that we can't call this an audit and we have to call it an effort. Okay, so that's fine. Let's use their word and let's call this a DOGE effort. All right. Let me show you exactly what this memo says, because Charlie appoints Justin Streiff as COO. And what does Justin oversee exactly? And this is per the memo. Let's list them directly. He's going to be overseeing development. Okay, that's fundraising, events, finance, which is explicitly mentioned. He's going to be looking over TPUSA Faith, media, marketing and productions, asset management, that's managing money, distribution, Turning Point Education, Brexit, HR, and Legal. Do you see what I see? Finance is right there in the list. Asset management is managing organizational resources and money. Now, let's look at what Charlie wanted this DOGE effort to do, which had 4 priorities. Becoming more efficient. Okay, so that means operational efficiency, streamlining processes. Okay, that could mean operational efficiency, but also streamlining processes. But in a business context, efficiency almost always means cost savings, doing more with less, spending less money. Number 2, becoming more cost effective. There it is, cost effective. That's not ambiguous. That's not about culture or morale or team building. That's about money. How much are we spending and how are we getting it and where are we getting the value for it and all of there in between. So unifying is, and then priority number 3 is unifying organizational success around company-wide metrics and goals. What are company-wide metrics and goals? Revenue, expenses, donor retention, cost per acquisition, return on investment, interest, and events. These are financial metrics. You don't unify organizational success or around vibes, okay, or in just a light effort. You unify it around measurable outcomes, and in a nonprofit, those outcomes are financial, okay? Those outcomes are financial. So number 4, this one is about culture, and it's not financial, so I'll give them that. So let's count. We've got 3 out of 4 priorities in Charlie's memo, which are financially focused. One explicitly mentions costs. Another explicitly mentions metrics and goals. So the person leading this effort oversees finance and asset management. So we're supposed to pretend Charlie wasn't asking, where's the money going? Are we spending it wisely? Are we getting good value? Are the metrics showing efficiency? TPUSA lawyers want to argue about whether we call it an audit or an effort, but the substance is clear. Charlie wanted someone to look at the money, to evaluate the spending, to measure efficiency and cost effectiveness. So call it whatever you want. 8 days after writing this very same memo, Charlie Kirk was dead. And whatever he wanted Justin Streiff to find, we'll never know, because as far as anyone can tell, that DOGE effort never happened, and it's likely never going to happen. Or if it did, nobody's talking about what it found. So when Zach asks what happened to Charlie's DOGE effort, that's not defamation, that's journalism. When he asks what happened to an audit, that's not defamation, that's analyzing a document written by the CEO and comprehending it as any normal human being would. So you're talking about semantics here. Where did your accountability go? This is abysmal. Watching you flail your fins in the ocean like you're some dying fish is all I see right now. Let me tell you what I found fascinating about this cease and desist, because it reveals exactly what TPUSA is trying to do here, in my opinion. Look at the pattern. Charlie's memo says DOGE effort. Zach called it a DOGE audit. TPUSA's complaint, you can't use the word audit because you need to use the word effort. That's what the document says in the memo. Okay, fine. So we'll use their word, but here's the question that they're avoiding altogether is what happened to Charlie's DOGE effort? Whether you call it an audit or an effort, Charlie wanted accountability for the entire company, culture included, all the other departments included. However, 3 out of the 4 priorities were conveyed as financial interests to be looked into. So if it happened, what did it find? And if it didn't, why didn't it happen? They're not answering, and they're arguing about vocabulary and literature. The 990 didn't report all of the employees, and Zach called them ghost employees. TPUSA's complaint, you can't use the phrase ghost employees. It was an inadvertent error. Okay, fine, inadvertent error, but here's what they admitted in that letter is there was, however, an inadvertent error in America's Turning Point filing, which failed to note these employees. So Zach was right. The employees were not reported. They confirmed it, but they want to sue him or threaten legally for him to shut up. Again, telling somebody to stop and shut up and stop asking questions over a word that he used to describe that memo. TPUSA operates multiple related entities. Zach referenced them as potential shell companies. The complaint that TPUSA has over this is how dare you use the term shell companies, but they're not explaining what these entities actually do. They're not explaining why money moves between them, and they're just mad about the terminology. Do you see what's happening here? This is a narrative control plot. This is trying to dictate the acceptable language for discussing their finances, which are public record, subsidized by tax-paying American citizens. If they can make you afraid to use certain words, they can make you afraid to stop asking questions or to ask certain questions. And the thing is that Zach explicitly said in his videos,
"Now, for legal reasons, I have to say that I do not have any evidence of a crime. We would need an investigation of the books at Turning Point to know for sure. What I am saying is that there are red flags in the financials at Turning Point and a lot of questions."
That's not defamation. That's journalism. And that's doing exactly what Charlie Kirk did for his entire career, asking hard questions and demanding answers. You know what this reminds me of? Every authoritarian playbook in history. When you can't win on substance, you attack the framing. You argue about definitions. You nitpick terminology. You threaten legal action for using the wrong words. Does this remind you about something that happened to Candace regarding somebody over in France? You remember that? Charlie Kirk spent his career fighting this very tactic. He literally set up a tent that said, "Prove me wrong," and invited people to challenge these ideas that he had. He didn't say challenge my ideas, but only if you use this exact terminology I approve of. He welcomed the confrontation, the substance, and hard questions. And now his organization that they claim that are going to be carrying the torch, carrying the bloody mic of Charlie Kirk, are sending legal letters arguing about whether someone should have used the word audit or effort. Charlie would be disgusted. And I can guarantee you he is turning in his grave. God bless Charlie. And now his organization is using those very same tactics that he was fighting his whole life. But let's set aside the word games here for a minute and talk about the actual substance. Because unlike TPUSA, I'm happy to answer the question, what do the documents actually show? According to Turning Point USA's own Form 990 filings available on ProPublica's Nonprofit Explorer, the employee reporting of the organization admitted in the cease and desist letter that there was an inadvertent error in their Form 990 filings, which failed to note 80 to 108 employees, which TPUSA confirms this in writing. Again, Zach was right. So their complaint is that he shouldn't have called them ghost employees. They prefer inadvertent error. What are you talking about, dude? Are you serious? Okay, fine. Let's play their game and use their language. But the substance stands. They left out 80 to 108 people who were not properly reported on a tax filing under penalty of perjury. Tyler Bowyer, the Chief Operating Officer, COO, appears on the 990 as an independent contractor rather than an employee. Turning Point USA's response in the letter, America's Turning Point lists it as COO as an independent contractor for a substantive role in America's Turning Point is more in line with contractor classification. So that's their position. And then Zach asked why. That's journalism. And according to their financials and Form 990 filings, Turning Point Action's revenue increased double and a half. 2.5x, give or take, over 1 year, 2024 fiscal year. So that's documented. That's public record. And Zach asked, what drove that growth? TPUSA says donors naturally direct more money towards elections activities in election years. That's their explanation. You can agree or disagree, but Zach had every right to ask this question. How is this defamation? In November of 2024, Turning Point Action was fined $18,000 by the Federal Election Commission, the FEC, for failing to disclose $33,795 in contributions. That's not speculation. That's documentation. Enforcement acted by a federal agency. The auditor that gives TPUSA clean audits, which is Baker Tilly, in January of just this last year of 2025, has been fined for $500,000 for quality control violations, which the settlement documents revealed an 83% failure rate in their audit inspections just in May of 25. They're alleging they've missed $1.7 million to some lady stealing from a Catholic charity to spend money at MGM Grand and Uber and Amazon. This isn't defamation. This is journalism here. These are facts. Government forms and documents from court filings, federal regulators. Charlie Kirk believed in accountability, not just for his political opponents, but for everybody. He talked to everyone. He tweeted about draining the swamp. He talked about corruption. He demanded transparency in government. He built a movement around the very idea that people in power should be questioned. And one of the people who believed in that principle the most was Charlie Kirk himself. So that Prove Me Wrong tour was not theater. In fact, he was killed over it. It was a statement, I believe my ideas, that can stand with scrutiny, and I'm not afraid to ask and answer questions. I welcome them. Charlie died for that principle. He literally died under a tent saying, prove me wrong. And they couldn't, so they killed him. And now the organization he founded is doing exact opposites of what he wanted. They're sending legal threats to silence questions. They're targeting small independent journalists who don't have the resources to fight back. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but that's besides the point. Charlie would have never stood for this. You can mark my words. Charlie were alive today and saw somebody asking these questions about TPUSA's finances using public documents. You know what he'd say? Great. Go in front of the line and let's talk. Instead, his widow is saying, shut up or we'll sue you. That's not Charlie's legacy. That's the opposite of everything he stood for. Let me tell you about who's actually carrying Charlie Kirk's legacy. Let me give you some names, some receipts, because this is what matters. Pastor John Amanchukwa at an official TPUSA event on November 27, 2025, called Candace Owens evil and demonic from the stage. And here's the part that should disgust you. He demanded the audience to applaud him for it. He told Candace's husband to stop his wife. From what? From asking questions about Charlie Kirk's death? This is a pastor at a Turning Point event demanding applause for calling somebody investigating Charlie's death demonic. What is demonic about that situation? Can you see there? Because Charlie, would he have stood for this? Would Charlie have invited a pastor on stage to call his critics or a friend or anybody criticizing the death of his wife, per se, demonic, and then demand an applause? Or would Charlie have invited the critique, brought him to the front of the line to debate it, and really maybe even help them figure it out? I think that the latter would happen. Pastor Rob McCoy, senior pastor at Calvary Chapel, which you've all heard of by now, and TPUSA's faith board member, Charlie's mentor, the man who officiated Charlie's wedding, which on July 27th of last year, 2025, less than 2 months before Charlie was killed, McCoy delivered a nearly 2-hour-long sermon. He targeted her under acting like she was under a Jezebel spirit. He said she was practicing witchcraft. He said she was possessed by demonic forces. And then he said, for people like this, there is nowhere safe for them in the world. Listen to this again. There is nowhere safe for them in the world. That's not theology. That is a physical threat. And when independent journalists like myself, like Zach's from Wolves of Finance, or others tried to archive that sermon audio in November, the sermon had mysteriously disappeared from God Speaks website. Just gone, 404 error. And that's Charlie Kirk's mentor, threatening a woman, asking questions, somebody who loved him as a friend. I mean, this is about foreign policy and TPUSA's finances. You know, threatening a woman, asking questions, calling her demonic. This was his friend. And when it got attention, they scrubbed it. Would Charlie have done that? Would Charlie threaten somebody for just asking questions? Because I'm pretty sure he said the way we stay free is by continuously asking questions. This is the pattern. Pastor Doug Wilson, speaking at America Fest in December, called Candace Owens' investigation demented and unhinged. And he got an applause. What is happening? This pattern, TPUSA faith pastors getting on stage at official TPUSA events and attacking people who are asking questions about Charlie's death and TPUSA's operations. That's not debating them. That's not answering their questions. This is attacking them. This is terrible. Calling them demonic, unhinged. And you know what else TPUSA is doing? According to a January 2026 investigation, TPUSA allegedly deployed bot farms to discredit people's investigating Charlie's death. Coordinated, inauthentic accounts, low follower accounts created in the last couple of years, attacking anyone who questions the official narrative. They're using the same playbook to silence people asking questions about Charlie. Charlie died for free speech. He died under a prove me wrong tent. And his organization is using bot farms allegedly and legal threats to silence speech. You know who else was using bot farms with TPUSA before under Rally Forge LLC? Jake Hoffman was using bot farms and he got banned from Facebook for it. And he's still getting paid by TPUSA today under 110 LLC. And maybe there's another one we'll find out soon. Isn't that interesting? Jake Hoffman is probably at it again. In my opinion, he is. Now, let me tell you who is actually carrying Charlie's legacy. Candace Owens. Wolves of Finance, Zach, doing tremendous work. Independent journalists documenting all the inconsistencies. There's so many people, Trigger Smart, Ian Carroll, Baron Coleman, Coach Colin. The list goes on. Project Constitution, shout out. All of you. There's too many to list. These people are not deploying bot farms. They're honoring Charlie. They're carrying this torch. They're not pastors demanding applause for calling investigators demonic, not organizations deploying fake bots to silence people on what people are talking about around Charlie's death, the people asking questions and demanding answers, the people who won't be silenced. That's Charlie's legacy. And the fact that TPUSA is targeting those very same people tells you everything that you need to know about what TPUSA has become. So I want to be very clear about something. I'm not going to make accusations, but I am going to keep asking questions. The same questions Charlie would have asked if he was in my position, your position. If TPUSA doesn't like the questions, then they have a simple solution. Answer them, just like Charlie would have done. Invite me to the front of the stage. Invite everyone else that's been asking questions, like Zach on a podcast. Address these questions. You didn't even have the podcast with you didn't even have the balls to have the podcast with Candace Owens. You won't even, you know that she'll slaughter you. You want to talk about numbers and get into it with, no, you don't. Obviously, you want to tell people to shut up. Since Charlie Kirk has been let down by the people around him every single step of the way since his death, it's up to us, the general public, to carry that torch, because his family, his so-called best friends, they've turned their back on him. Look at the organization. The letter to Zach of Wolves of Finance says everything. An organization that hides from scrutiny, an organization that silences critics, an organization using legal threats instead of answering questions. This is not something Charlie would have stood for, and neither will I. So to Zach from Wolves of Finance, keep going, brother. Keep going. You're doing exactly what Charlie would have done, and you're going to have to keep asking those hard questions. You're reading the receipts. You're just reading what's public information. You haven't made anything up, my man. You're demanding accountability like the rest of us, and I applaud you for it. That's not defamation. That's carrying Charlie's torch and his legacy forward, unlike his own company, unlike his family, unlike his best friends, supposedly. And to TPUSA, if you're watching this, you have a choice. We don't want you to be this terrible company. We want you to be great. You're misconstruing everything. We want you to carry Charlie's legacy as he intended it, so you can answer the questions, or you can keep sending legal letters to small YouTubers. So the choice is answer the questions or keep sending legal letters. One of those honors Charlie's memory, the other betrays it. Choose it wisely. I want you to succeed, but I don't think that you're going to continue how Charlie wanted this company to go.
Charlie Kirk, we will never forget you. You spoke your truth. They silenced your voice. We got the mic now, big dog.